Okay, well I'm off on a ramble today with Alice Bettany of Sacred Seeds. Alice is a herbalist based in East Sussex and she's going to give me a little tour around Box Hill. We're going to be looking at some really common plants, but she's going to give me a deeper insight into their medicinal uses.
The first shrub we came across on our walk was the elderberry.
So this is elderberry, Sambucus nigra. So apart from the fact that you can eat the flowers on elderberry, and obviously could produce the elderberry later in the year, what medicinal uses would you say you could use for this plant?
Well, the elder is, all parts of the plant are medicinal actually, but kind of used for different things. So the flowers, this is one of the first flowers that I've seen this year, and they're just going to be coming out now. They're particularly good for reducing heat, so for fevers, for instance. But you wouldn't to help yourself with a fever, you'd have it as a really hot tea, and you try and drink the tea as hot as possible, and it would help get the heat up and out. So initially you might notice that you would have a slightly raised temperature while that process is happening. So the only instance that you wouldn't use this would be if you had a really young child that had a really strong febrile condition that was quite serious. Then you would actually be needing to get the fever down. But for the average flu or cold or the average fever, it really helps to get the heat up and out. And yeah, so I'd also use it for hay fever. It's actually strongly antihistamine. So the sort of herbal approach for hay fever, look, we've got the nettles right here as well, which are also antihistamine, and then plantain. So either plantain, lanceolata or major, you could use, and you make the three-pronged attack would be elderflowers, nettles and plantain. And you'd have that as a tea or as a tincture or made into any sort of medicinal form that suited you. And you'd take that, start taking that long before the hay fever kicked in, so maybe like February or something. You'd start treating yourself naturally for hay fever. And it's, you know, it's one of these things where the hay fever season kicks off for lots of people, and then suddenly you've got all the plants available right there for you when you need them. The same with the berries in the autumn. You're going into the winter time when everyone's getting colds and flus, and the berries are hugely antiviral, so one of our best sort of winter medicine cabinet herbs as well. So I like to dry the flowers and make them into tea, or I also like to infuse the flowers into honey. Okay. And that's delicious. You can leave the flowers in and just have that on your toast. And that's also another treatment for hay fever. If you use the local honey as well, it's sort of that element of treating like with like. So you're ingesting small amounts of local pollens that build up your own resistance to the pollen, inflammatory effect of the pollen. And I also like to make elderflower fritters with the children. So we kind of pick off the elderflowers, dip them in batter, and then fry them in a pan, and then you can just kind of eat the petals. So the leaves, however, are, in my belief, is that they're poisonous. So they would have an emetic reaction, so it would make you throw up. Not everyone believes that, but that's my belief. And when you smell them, they smell pretty gross and rancid, actually. But you can use them topically to help with sprains and bruises. So you could make a poultice, chop them all up and put them onto your sprained ankle, for instance. Or you could infuse it into oil along with daisies, which is also really good for bruises, to make a bruise ointment. And you can also use the leaves as an insect repellent because they smell so bad. If you rub them all over you, then they deter the insects as well, all the midges and things like that.
Okay, so obviously at this time of year, there's tons and tons in this field that we're in of daisies and dandelions. So I know that you can eat daisies, and I think they've been referred to as daisy, the name daisy eye, because they close during the evening. So medicinally, what sort of uses would they be used for?
So the old name for daisy is poor man's arnica. And arnica is a homeopathic remedy that's used for bruises. and daisies are an amazing bruise herb. So if you were out and about and you had a knock and you knew that you were going to get quite a big bruise, you could literally chew up a few daisies and use that as a poultice and put that onto the site of the knock or the bruise. Or more commonly, because this is the time, the springtime is when daisies are most prolific, but obviously you can often find them all year round, but not in such large quantities as this time of year. So now would be the time that I would harvest and pick as many daisies as possible, and I would infuse them into an oil and then make a bruise ointment of my own, a bruise salve. Maybe I would add in that we got some little plantain here. So plantain's also really good for wounds and cuts and stings and bites. So maybe I would add in some plantain and yarrow and woundwort and all sorts of wild herbs that are good for wounds, and put that into the salve as well, and make like a multi-purpose wound, bite, bruise salve or something like that. Arnica is really well known and really well used, but arnica is also an endangered plant. It likes to grow in the alpine environment, and it's not very sustainable. So we've obviously got like so many daisies in this country, so using daisies instead of arnica is much better. I like to put them on my salads. I like to get the little jeweler's loupe out and have a look at the daisies through the microscope, because it's a really, really special treat for your eyes to see into the little private world of the daisies there.
I notice as well when you eat daisies, they've got that, like I say, a cucumber flavour, that slight sweet, crunchy texture as well when you eat them. They're lovely. I find them a little bit, like if you chew the daisy for a little while, they go a little bit gloopy in your mouth. Like there is this element of mucilaginous quality which is quite soothing. So you can use the oxeye daisies that are kind of in their prime, like more like June time, all along the roadsides. You can use the oxeye daisies interchangeably for bruises as well. But the oxeye daisies are also used medicinally for chesty coughs and bronchitis and things like that as well. Okay. So we've got the dandelion next to it.
We have indeed.
Now, I've made coffee from the roots of dandelions. So what other uses? I've just eaten some of the petals as well earlier, so they're very nice as a little snack on a walk. But I know they've been associated as wet the beds for kids, so I'm guessing that there's a urinary use for them. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, so the leaves of the dandelions, the French would call that pissenlit, which means wet the bed, and it's because they have really strong diuretic effects. So the really interesting thing about the dandelion leaf is if you were to get if you were to have an issue with water retention, let's say you had swollen ankles, or around your period you got a lot of water retention as well. Sometimes if you were given diuretic tablets, they can, or they used to, they've changed it now, but they used to take out a lot of your potassium at the same time. Whereas dandelion leaves are really rich in potassium, so they not only help the excess water get out of your body, but they replenish the lost minerals through that process and give you extra potassium. They're very bitter, the leaves as well. You can use a few in your salads, which would be really good for you to do. Most of us need to have more bitters in our diet these days, because our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have had a substantial percentage of bitter in their diet, and these days our taste buds are sort of predominantly treated to sort of salty and sweet things a lot of the time. So and the bitter element, so the root is even more bitter than the leaf, and the root would be something that I would use in like digestive bitter mixes, or for people that had sluggish digestions, constipation, bloating, things like that, and it basically increases the production of bile, which stimulates your liver and helps detoxify your body. Your liver is responsible for detoxifying all sorts of excess hormones and chemicals and things in your body. So to have a healthy liver is to essentially be a healthy person in lots of ways, and all the bitter components are going to help you look after your liver and help it work help it function properly.
That's very interesting. I might sample a little bit of this now, actually, I think. So there you go. I don't want to eat, obviously, the green bits, but I will sample the little yellow flowers.
How do they taste, Vince?
It tastes alright, funny enough.
For me, they taste quite sweet, like quite pollen rich.
It's not as bad as you think it might be. It's actually quite pleasant for a wild plant. So
Now I think you should have a nibble on the leaf and compare the two.
okay. I've had the leaf before. When you first eat into it, it's got quite a bland flavour, and then you get that kick in after, that slightly bitter flavour, which I know has been associated with being good for the liver, because it gets the liver to break down the chemicals that are actually in there. But yeah, I've eaten them before, and I think during certain times of the year, when maybe it's possibly later in the year, where they don't taste as bad. So not something I could eat a lot of, to be fair.